our faith be made to sign. The trump will sound at your returning, and I will meet you in.
Hey, good morning, Calvary family. Pastor Chris here. Glad that you decided to stick around for a little bit today after the service and have a short discussion with us about some of the things that you heard. You just heard this great service from Pastor Doug as we are continuing to look at the life of Jacob and this journey that he's on of faith. And really today we see this idea of him in all of the relationships that are in his life. But before we get into some of those things, again, if you are watching with us, we are so glad that you are. Right now, if you want to let us know that you're watching in the chat section, either on YouTube or Facebook, maybe hit an emoji, let us know how you're feeling this morning. But again, this is a time for us to have conversation. This is a time and opportunity for you to maybe share prayer requests if something's happening in your life. We want to pray for you. We want to pray with you. So let us know what's going on right there. We have some prayer counselors and some of our welcome team that's in there as well. And so as we looked at these 3 chapters of Genesis today, it is jam-packed with different relationships. And we know that relationships can oftentimes be difficult. Relationships are amazing, they're awesome, one of the best part of our lives, but also at the same time, they can be really hard. And I think it's because people can sometimes be difficult. And what we see here today, and I love what Pastor Doug was talking about, how this picture of a wheel and all of these different relationships we have in our life are really intertwined. But at the center of all of that, there is this idea that our relationship with God is what kind of keeps everything in place. In 1 John chapter 1, verse 7, it talks about this idea of our relationship with God. When we're walking in the light, when we're close to Him, that if we're doing that, then we can have real, true, good relationship with the people that are around us. But relationships require investment. It's not easy. There's hard work involved. We saw that today. And it's more than just kind of that love at first sight thing. And we saw that with Jacob. And he sees Rachel, and he's all excited. And he kind of flexes and moves that stone from the face of the well. But relationships don't just kind of start with a bang. Though they do, there has to be this consistent investment into relationships. And that's not just with the humans ones we have. If we just said, and we agree with, that our relationship with God should be the center of everything, well, that relationship is going to require investment too. And certainly there's times when the relationship with God starts off and it's like this amazing thing. You're at church, you give your life to the Lord, or someone's been kind of sharing Jesus with you, and maybe it's in someone's house, and you give your life to the Lord, and you start off on fire. But over time, that fire can kind of grow dim, and that's where this investment in your time with Jesus really starts to pay off and keeps that fire burning inside of you. And so as Jacob's journey continues, we see that he runs into his uncle Laban. And Uncle Laban is a deceiver, just like Jacob, and he pulls this terrible scheme on Jacob on his wedding night. He thinks that he's marrying Rachel, but he ends up, in fact, marrying Leah. And we get this idea of what the Bible calls in Galatians 6, sowing and reaping, that you reap what you sow. We talk about this a lot. We talk about the rules of sowing and reaping, that you will always reap what you sow. You will always reap more than you sow. And you'll always reap later than you sow. And the Bible's telling us that's not just for bad things, because we see here, Jacob, he kind of deceived his dad, and now it's all coming back around on him again. And that's part of the way that God designed it. But it's also this idea that what we sow for good can come back and pay off in the long run. And so maybe you're in some kind of season, maybe something's happening in your life where you've been sowing a good seed. You've been trying to invest in a relationship. You've been trying to do something at work. There's something that's between you and the Lord, and you've been praying, and you're not seeing any breakthrough. Again, Galatians chapter 6, verse 9 says, don't grow weary. Don't lose heart. Keep doing good. Keep sowing those seeds of righteousness. But I think it says that because the Bible knows that there's times when we want immediate results. We want it our way, we want it right now, and God says, I just don't work that way. Hebrews 10:36 says that we need patience so that after we've done the will of God, then we can receive the promise. So maybe you're watching this morning and you're like, yeah, you know what? Here's where I've been kind of investing and praying and looking for God to show up. I feel like I'm doing the right thing, but I'm not seeing anything happen. What is that area of your life? If you would be so bold or so courageous to share that. Here's what I've been kind of sowing good seed into, and I haven't seen anything yet. I'm going to say that this is more of a prayer request. If you want to leave your comments right now in the chat section, that you say, here's that thing that I've been sowing in. I haven't seen anything, and maybe I even feel like I'm losing heart. We want to pray for each other. We want to encourage one another because God is encouraging us through each other, saying, hey, no, don't lose heart. Keep sowing. Wait on me. I'm going to come through, but you need patience. And so we see this again in the life of Jacob. And then we see this sibling rivalry between these two sisters. This race kind of takes off for Jacob's love, and they do that by having all of these babies. And they think the more babies they can have, the more Jacob's going to love them. And there's this bitterness that now comes in between these two sisters. But it's very interesting that even in the middle of this sibling rivalry and this dysfunction in this family, God is still looking at these two women and has a heart for them. In the beginning, we see him look at Leah, and he sees that she's unloved. And the Bible tells us that he sees her. His focus, his attention is on her. And then we go a little bit further, and Rachel, towards the end, God saw that she wasn't able to have a child yet, and he opens her womb, and she's able to have the baby. And we see God's grace meeting us in the hardest times of our lives, but again, in times when we wouldn't expect him to be gracious and good towards us. We saw that last week with Jacob. He's on the run. He's kind of suffering the consequences of his sin. He finds himself in a deserted place, and yet God shows up and he reminds him of his promises. Yeah, Jacob, even though you've messed up and you've wandered from me, I still love you. I'm still for you. I'm still pursuing you. And he does that here with these two sisters. And many times it's that grace in those hard moments that transforms and changes our lives. It's not always those mountaintop experiences where everything is great. It's the valleys when God meets us and reminds us of his love. That is what begins to change us. And so the story continues. Jacob has another dream. God says it's time to go. And he gets his family, packs them up, and he leaves. But there is some brokenness still there with Laban. There's this unresolved relationship, and Laban begins to pursue. And he catches up to them, and there's this conversation, there's this covenant made, but what we see is that the broken relationships in our lives aren't something we can kind of just sweep under the rug and move on, because they will continue to follow us throughout our lives. And it's why the Bible tells us that as Christians, we have to do everything that's within our power to pursue peace with people. And again, as we looked at the beginning and talked about how amazing relationships are, but in the same breath, they're the hardest things in life. Maybe someone watching this morning, you have a broken relationship. Maybe even today, you're harboring unforgiveness against someone that you know. Maybe it's a neighbor, a coworker, a classmate, a family member, someone. It could be someone you're in the same house with today. Have you done everything within your power to pursue peace? And if not, I'll ask you a question. I want to ask you, what can you do this week to pursue peace with someone where there's brokenness, where there's a divide? What are you willing to do? Would you be willing to even kind of tell us in the chat so that we can pray for you and encourage you in that? And our motivation for those kind of things, because that's easier for me to sit here on the other side of this camera and screen and say, yeah, pursue peace with someone that's hurt you or where there's brokenness. It's easy for me to say that. But for you who needs to do it, the motivation, always Jesus. Always be reminded of the lengths that God went through to reconcile us to him. He sent his son. And his son was willing to die on a cross so that we could have relationship with him. Have you done everything within your power to pursue peace? If not, what's something that you could do this week? Put it in the chat section. What is it? Maybe it's pray, maybe it's reach out, maybe it's send an email, write a note. What is that thing that you could do to kind of pursue reconciliation where you might find brokenness? And I think the most beautiful thing that we see is that in all of life, all the brokenness continues to push us towards Jesus, and that's why we can count it all joy. But I want us to close our time with kind of a little bit of a discussion. I can remember sitting in a meeting, and I've shared this here before at our campus, and there was like this test, this question that was posed to us. And so we had 30 seconds to answer these questions. And so the first question was this: write down the 3 sermons in your life that have changed you the most. Give me the title and the person who preached it. We kind of all sat there and we're racking our minds, and most of us are just writing down whatever Pastor Doug preached the previous Sunday, because you really can't remember. Maybe there's one that sticks out, but it's tough to remember every sermon you've ever heard and how it's changed you. And so it's like, okay, maybe there's one. The next question, write down the top 3 experiences in your life that have changed you the most and made you more like Jesus, pushed you close to him. That one was a little bit easier. We were able to list some of those. But it was the last question that really drove home the point of who were the top 3 people in your life that have impacted you the most, that have made you more like Jesus? Well, that one, man, the answers begin to fly. Why? Because God designed it that way. God wants to use relationships in our life to change us and to make us more like him. So the discussion question for this morning, I'm going to step off for a little bit, and you guys are going to talk about who's the one person in your life who has impacted you the most, who has drawn you closest to Jesus, who has maybe encouraged you when you needed encouragement, challenged you when you needed to be challenged, and how has that person changed you? How have they actually impacted your life in your discipleship, in growing to become more like Jesus? So those are the two questions I want you guys to discuss right now. I'll give you a few minutes to do that, and then I'll come back and close us in prayer.
When I'm looking at the face of disappointment, I stand before my unparted seas. When my heart has felt the whisper of your promise that I have yet to see. Before I see the miracle before me, before the night has given way to dawn, let my heart be found still singing of your goodness, that you might know my love. Still you are good, my Father. Still you are good, Still you are good, my Father. Still you are good to me. Even if the storm never ceases raging, if the water never turns to wine, I will sing aloud the hope that never fails me. I am yours and you are mine. Still you are good, my Father. Still you are good. Still you are good, my Father. Still you are good to me. I believe in you, in every word you've spoken, all your promises you're faithful to keep. I believe that you will finish all you started. Faithful you have been, faithful you will be. I believe in you, in every word you've spoken, all your promises you're faithful to keep. Oh, I believe that you will finish all you started. Faithful you have been, faithful you will be.
So I think we see it in the Bible and we see it in our own lives. As amazing as relationships are, they can be really difficult. But again, those are the things that God uses to make us most like him. Our God is a God of relationship. He desires a relationship with us. That's part of the gospel, that he reconciled us to himself. He made us sons and daughters. But let's never forget that the other part of the gospel is that he also made us brothers and sisters. And those relationships can be hard sometimes, but when we invest in them, when we work at it, it can be some of the most beautiful things in our lives. So I hope that today was helpful for you. I hope that it gave you something to kind of apply to your life this week as you go ahead. And as we kind of look ahead to the next week, this upcoming Saturday, Father's Day weekend, is when we'll be doing summer nights here at our campus. Those are live services that are going to be held outside. Registration's required. We are limited on space, so make sure you go online to the website to figure out how you can register for that. But we're looking forward to gathering together again as a body. And until then, we'll see you guys, and make sure you join us midweek for our study at 6:30 p.m. We love you guys. God bless you.
When I'm looking at the face of disappointment, I stand before my unparted seas. When my heart has felt the whisper of your promise that I have yet to see. Before I see the miracle before me, before the night has given way to dawn, let my heart be found still singing of your goodness, that you might know my love. Still you are good, my Father. Still you are good, Still you are good, my Father. Still you are good to me. Even if the storm never ceases raging, if the water never turns to wine, I will sing aloud the hope that never fails me. I am yours and you are mine. Still you are good, my Father. Still you are good, Still you
peace finds me in lack of nothing. When sorrow fills this empty soul, my hope is found in you securely, and I will say that it is well. Oh, come what may, you stay the same. Oh, come what may, Jesus, you stay the same. I will not fear, for you are here. Oh, come what may, Jesus, you stay the same. You stay the same. When trials close in and press against me, my hope in you will take control. And that Christ has seen my fallen stature and shed his blood to save